So the strike in Qatar is over, and the United States is saying that they no longer wish to further escalate regional tensions. For now. No casualties have been reported, and we can now begin to assess the coming strategies and whether or not I was wrong that we are going to war. Yet.
A wise guy, eh?
Salutations, fellow nerds. I'm Rick Y, and today is still June 23rd, 2025. The dust is beginning to settle, and it appears as though Iran has launched a decisive, albeit purely performative and weak retaliation against the United States on forces in Qatar. Trump seems to be responding, at least for now, by holding his own restraint, which is admittedly a little strange. While the parliament there has chosen to close the Strait of Hormuz, it still needs to be confirmed by the Supreme National Security Council before being fully enacted. So as of now, it appears as though Iran may be a cornered tiger. So let's unpack the events of the day. So what's going on? Not only did Iran warn the U.S. ahead of time of an impending rocket attack, all of the missiles had been intercepted by their defensive systems. They even recorded the missiles launching and played it over their state media. They also didn't rain hellfire down the way they do in Israel, but instead launched exactly the same number of munitions at us as we did them. Indeed, damage was minimal, and that could have been the intent, which gives them the narrative like, we struck back bravely, we sent a message, we avenged ourselves, and now we can return to our tea. Internally, they can say that they've struck back and they're not cowards, but abroad they're signaling that they're fierce but not ready to cross that threshold, which is super interesting, and I don't think it'll be ignored. The reality of this is it really could just fizzle out. If the U.S. is not coaxed back into another attack by Israel, no casualties continue to be reported, and oil prices stabilize, Trump could very well spin this as a big win. Right now, Iran is walking a tightrope, and it's why they chose to attack when they did. Tehran is on this tightrope of unbelievable complexity where their proxies have been getting smashed for months since even prior to Trump's rise. Our forces have been consistently destroying Hezbollah and Shia paramilitaries in Iraq and Syria since Obama's term. The drone attack on Qasem Soleimani took out the head of Iran's Quds forces and the leader of Iraq militias. On top of that, the regional ally Bashar al-Assad was deposed in December. Meanwhile, Israel is basically at the gates. Strategically speaking, their only real allies for the moment are China and Russia, and neither one of them are going to be interested in a potential world war over the likes of Iran. They would sooner see a regime change and back the next head of state before risking all of that. Contrary to popular belief, those two are not particularly chomping at the bit to get into an actual military kerfuffle. If Trump can spin this on the global stage as being a decisive blow, Iran will not only come out with more embarrassment, but they'll come out weaker than they are now. Realistically speaking, at the moment they hold a unique moral high ground in that their territory had been attacked and that their sovereignty had been challenged by the West. Again. But if they allow Trump to get a victory out of this, the David versus Goliath narrative will turn into a Goliath coming in, smashing a bunker, and walking away. They look militarily weak. Their missiles got shot down. Their retaliation was purely symbolic. Their nuke program, possibly crippled. Again, if that happened and their deterrent fails, if regional actors stop fearing them, even Hezbollah and the Houthis might start to dial it back. On top of that, Trump looks strong to allies and swing voters at home. The problem is Iran wants to avoid being the 2025 version of Iraq in 2003, isolated, demonized, and bombed, with nobody left to care. Another huge issue that Iran's government has to face is the current domestic situation that they're in. Their economy is admittedly strained. Sanctions and inflation have made everyday living difficult and eroded their middle class. Widespread protests have rocked the country in recent years, especially following the death of Mahsa Amini in 2022. The Woman Life Freedom Movement united people across demographics, and while crackdowns were violent, the resentment never really disappeared. and it's still simmering under the surface. Realistically, as well, while Iran is a theocracy, many Iranians are increasingly secular or disillusioned with clerical rule. The Ayatollah and hardliners still command loyalty from the elites and paramilitaries like the IRGC, but the population is less ideologically compliant than in decades past. Not to mention, Iran's healthcare system was absolutely devastated by COVID-19, and the government mismanagement created even more mistrust. Talented, educated Iranians are leaving, or at least they're trying to. There's a massive brain drain, especially in STEM, arts, and activism. And despite relationships with Russia, China, and Venezuela, Iran remains globally isolated, and that means fewer lifelines when things get as hot as they are right now. In short, Iran can't afford a full-scale war. Their regime is overstretched, internally unpopular, and surrounded by adversaries. That's why a limited response, like the symbolic Qatar strike, may have been designed to save face without tipping into collapse. So what are the likely options that they're going to consider? They're probably going to stoke anti-Americanism across the global south, especially in places that are already skeptical of U.S. power, like Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia. And this would actually benefit China's role in the South Pacific, something we absolutely cannot afford at the moment. They'll likely lean hard into diplomacy with China and Russia, but if we're going to admit truths, they're fair-weathered friends. They'll probably retaliate indirectly. Cyber attacks, economic disruptions, more subtle proxy operations, basically nothing that we haven't already handled in the past. They're also going to try and control the narrative at home, framing this as a survival against imperial aggression, even if their nose is bleeding. So I could very well end up being wrong about this turning into a larger war. And personally, if this does happen to de-escalate, great. I don't call that a loss as much as I call it a relief, because I don't think a lot of you understand how much personal skin I have in this game. I didn't want and never do want to be right about that. I wanted to be prepared, and if my warning helped even one person understand how close we came to escalation, then I did my job. And if the dust settles and Trump even appears strong, Iran's strategy of patience will start to look a lot like paralysis. And worst of all, it reinforces U.S. neocon logic that bombing is diplomacy, which is a terrifying precedent. If you enjoyed the commentary, make sure you consider liking and subscribing, and as always, y'all come back now. You hear?